The Hereditary ending is open to interpretation and leaves a lot of open-ended questions surrounding the demon Paimon. In Hereditary, Annie Graham is an artist whose mother has just passed away, and though her son Peter and husband Steve appear to be mostly indifferent towards her death, Annie's daughter Charlie seems especially troubled. This kicks off a brief exploration into Charlie's peculiar tendencies, clipping off the head of a dead bird, crafting abnormal creatures out of scraps, before a series of seemingly insignificant events leads to her untimely death. From there, the movie edges suddenly into the supernatural, introducing seances, ghosts, and the occult. However, whether or not the specters that appear to be haunting their home are real or just heightened projections of grief, there is very clearly something malevolent inhabiting this grief-stricken family, and whether the Hail, Paimon conclusion of Hereditary feels especially satisfying depends on whichever interpretation of horror the audience feels inclined to follow. Hereditary's literal interpretation. The demon king Paimon is resurrected and inhabits Peter's body. In the Hereditary ending, it's revealed that Annie's mother was deeply involved in the occult, namely as a devout worshipper of the demon Paimon, one of the 8 kings of hell, and per the cult's mission, Annie was tasked with helping Paimon manifest the body of a human child. She had attempted to use Peter as a host when he was born, but Annie was far too territorial, inadvertently prompting them to use Charlie instead. However, given that a male host was preferred, Charlie's death, whether coincidental, serendipitous, or somehow divinely induced, worked to the cult's benefit. This prompted the transferring of Paimon's soul into Peter's body, and it required some mortal assistance, which explains the company of fellow cultist Joan and Dowd. What's more is that Annie, who had done her best at keeping her family tethered up until the final few moments of the movie, becomes possessed herself, not only aiding in Peter's death but in Paimon's resurrection. Maybe she should have seen this coming, considering the demon symbol was littered throughout the movie, namely on her and her mother's own necklaces. Having been tricked into summoning the demon, Annie is sadly revoked of her matriarchal title and cuts off her own head as a final sacrifice for the greater good being evil in this case. In fact, the recurring decapitations in this movie suggest that Charlie's death, by way of decapitation, was no coincidence after all, especially given the fact that Paimon's symbol is etched onto the very telephone pole that ends up removing her head. In the end, the Graham family is invaded by demon worshippers. Annie's mother successfully brings about the resurrection of a demonic being, even in death, and Paimon's spirit inhabits Peter's body. As a result, Hereditary heavily echoes Rosemary's Baby and The Omen, with evil edging out good. That said, the literal interpretation of Hereditary is just as potent as the one that delves less into the supernatural than it does mental health.